Welcome to the Salish Sea Fellowship Sunday afternoon service. Our speakers today are Harvey Rice and Jackie Cole. Their sermon title is Tibetan Adventure. We hope you enjoy this recording of our service, and we hope to see you in person some Sunday afternoon. Thanks for listening.
Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Your daddy's rich and your mom is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings, you're gonna rise up singing. Then you'll spread your wings and you'll take to the sky. Till that morning, there's no one can harm you. 'Cause Daddy and Mommy are standing by. Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Your daddy's rich and your mom is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry.
Thank you. That was our very own Terry, Chris, and Pat Trio. They'll be performing later this afternoon in the service. Good afternoon and welcome to the Salish Sea Fellowship. We are an independent, liberal, religious community born from a struggle to protect our right to freedom of speech and our desire for open discussion and debate of church practice and dogma. We encourage lives lived with loving hearts and open minds, embracing the traditional principles of Unitarianism and Universalism. My name is David Rimpf, and I am the pulpit assistant today. Our speakers today come to us from Galveston, Texas. Harvey Rice and Jackie Cole come highly recommended, friends of Joyce and Janet. Janet Robinson has been a member of the same church as them in Galveston. Now I'd like to caution you, if you've not already done so, to place your phones in silent mode so as not to disturb the time we have set aside together. Then I would like to ask if there's anyone visiting us for the first time, if you would stand or raise your hand so we know who you are. Any first-timers here today? I would hand her this one. There's no takers. Okay. And now I invite you all to settle in, quiet your minds, and begin our sacred time together by ringing our chime. I'll now light the chalice with these words. In times of light, in times of darkness, may this small flame keep a bit of good in us and in the world. We'll now have the opening hymn. I might mention at this point that we got no piano today. I understand that Kui has damaged her wrist. We're all so sorry. How long is it going to be? Thanks. 6 weeks. Wish you well.
Peace like a river, I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got ocean in my soul, in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. Like the raindrops, I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul, in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
We make time for us. We'll now have the offertory. And is the spokesperson here at the house? No. Okay. Well, the offering, as was mentioned in the announcement, the offering today will be for the Dove House and this violence shelter. And I'm supposed to say something about how you collect money for us and for them. Nils, what is that procedure? It all goes to Dove House, unless you mark it for the fellowship. Okay, fine. All right. And while the ushers come among us, the usher will listen once again to the Terry, Chris, and
No place in this world where I'll belong when I'm gone. And I won't know the right from the wrong when I'm gone. You won't find me singing on this song when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. I won't breathe the bracing air when I'm gone. And I can't even worry about my cares when I'm gone. Can't say who's to praise and who's to blame when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't be running from the rain when I'm gone. And I can't even suffer from the pain when I'm gone. Won't be asked to do my share when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. Won't see the golden of the sun when I'm gone. The evenings and the mornings will be one when I'm gone. And sing louder than the guns when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. My days won't be dances of delight when I'm gone. And the sands will be shifting from my sight when I'm gone. Can't add my name to the fight when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. And I won't be laughing at the lies when I'm gone. Can't question how or when or why when I'm gone. Can't live proud enough to die when I'm gone. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here. So I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here.
I'll now invite George Francis to pulpit to offer reading and introduce our speakers.
I am happy to welcome our speakers today, Jackie Cole and Harvey Rice. And as David mentioned, they come to us from Galveston, Texas, but by way of Deadwood, Oregon, where they spend the summer with her family. My sister, as you heard Janet Robinson introduce us to, Jackie is a retired veterinarian, and Harvey spent 40 years as a reporter and editor, the last 18 years with the Houston Chronicle. For 2 decades, Jackie has studied Bon, Tibet's oldest and least known religion. Jackie and Harvey were able to visit Tibet in 2014 and experienced firsthand the oppression and intimidation by the Chinese. Last year, they published their book, Flight of the Bon Monks, War, Persecution, and Salvation of Tibet's Oldest Religion, which won the 2024 International Book Award for Nonfiction in the Creative category. Their book tells the story of 3 very high-level Bon monks' heroic escape in 1959 from Tibet and the subsequent rebirth of the Bon religion in exile, a summary of which they'll be sharing with you today. So I want to welcome both of you. We've had a couple of days to have fun. I am going to do a reading that is the preface, the foreword to their book, and it is by the Dalai Lama. This book, Flight of the Bon Monks, tells the story of the escape to freedom of 3 individuals, one of whom was Menri Presen Sanja Tenzin, did I do that right? I worked on it, who played the key roles in reestablishing the Tibetan Bon tradition in exile. Despite our sincere efforts at peaceful coexistence, the Chinese authorities in Lhasa were intent on crushing any form of resistance. This led to the Tibetan People's Uprising in 1959, which in turn forced me and tens of thousands of Tibetans to escape into exile. Regardless of the challenges of being uprooted from our homeland, we have been able to establish a firm foundation for the survival of our identity and culture in India, primarily with the generous support and encouragement of the government of India. As this book explains, the comparatively small Bon folk community in exile is a clear example of this success. Although I often speak of how Tibetans have kept alive the ancient Indian traditions of study and practice upheld at Nalanda University, the pre-Buddhist Bon tradition adds a distinct Tibetan quality. I am confident that the readers will appreciate the efforts their authors Harvey Rice and Jackie Cole have made to shed light on the Tibetan Bon religious tradition, signed by the Dalai Lama. So, well, we have some special music and then you will hear their story.
Sing along if you want. This is a Jerry Garcia song.
If my words did glow with the gold of sunshine, and my tunes were played on the harp unstrung, would you hear my voice come through the music? Would you hold it near as it were your own? It's a hand-me-down. The thoughts are broken, if you go, no one may follow. That path is for your steps alone. Ripple in still water, there is no pebble tossed, nor wind to blow. You who choose to lead must follow. But if you fall alone. If you should stand, then who's to guide you? If I do the way I would take you home. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la.
Hi, I'm Jackie. Is this on? Okay, thank you. It's so nice to be here. We're really happy to be here and to tell you our story. We've been on a great adventure for the last probably 12 years or so to write this story, and I wish I could say it was ours, but we're just the conduit for this absolutely amazing story. This is a map of Tibet. And we're telling the stories of my meditation teachers' escape from Tibet back when they had to leave when the Chinese invaded. And we tell their stories from childhood until now, essentially. We weave in the amazing geography, lifestyles, mores, and culture of this very isolated country. Although I'm here in this small group, and a number of you have already told me you've visited Tibet, so that's wonderful. Tibet is very isolated due to choices it made, which made it vulnerable, but also due to its geography. I consider Tibet to be the very definition of the word vast, if you were to put it in the dictionary, vast Tibet. And then within the book is a whole host of supporting characters, interesting in their own right, but they also help to set up the situation and to see the events as they go through. Two of our characters, Sanjay Tenzin and Samdin Karme, came from neighboring villages in Amdo and went to school together. Tibet, India, Nepal, Bhutan, and then this is all China. So Amdo is up in this area. They actually were from this part here. And our next character, major character, Tenzin Namdok was in Kham. He was born in 1926. Destined to be monks in their youths, the invasion by the Chinese and subsequent crackdown on the religious institution changed their lives completely. Tenzin Namdok was shot and left for dead during his escape attempt, only to be saved by friends and strangers along the way. Samten Karme and Sanjay Tenzin were able to walk out of Nepal uneventfully. They'd been in Lhasa at the time of the shelling and the uprising, witnessed that, but were able to escape and walk out from there. If you consider 2 months on the road, uneventful to Nepal, only to be hit with dysentery and in the crowded refugee camps in Nepal. Then, fortuitously, in various assorted ways, the three of them ran into this British scholar who invited them to London, joining the three most learned of the Bon community in exile, and starting them on a journey that would inexorably change their lives and the lives of the Bonpo Tibetans.
So, although I had long contemplated writing a book, never in my wildest fantasies had I conceived that the book would be about a few Tibetan monks from an obscure religion. Had it not been for Jackie, I never would have. Jackie appeared in my home office one afternoon about 12 years ago with a book proposition. She regaled me with a fascinating story about one of her teachers who had been ambushed and left for dead while trying to escape Chinese communist religious oppression. I immediately agreed it was a great story. Thus began a journey that ended in the publication of our book. We had no idea how compelling the story was when we began. Gradually, we realized we were writing about the salvation of a religion that otherwise would have fallen into irrelevance and control by the Chinese Communist Party. I already knew something about Bon through Jackie, who was a practitioner when I married her. But as we interviewed Bon monks, my respect for this little-known religion grew. I could only admire the faith, strength, and determination of our characters, as well as the humanity and worldview of Bon that sustained them through adversity and trials that would daunt the stoutest heart. As a secular Buddhist, I already adhered to some Bon teachings, but researching the book turned out to be an education in a religious philosophy that enables individuals to deal with an often chaotic and cruel world. For instance, a key Bon precept is that the only unchanging aspect of our world is the certainty of change. I embrace the idea, and it has helped me deal with the inevitable and often unexpected changes of everyday life. I'll turn it back over to Jack.
So Buddhism began with or most of the Buddhism in the world began with the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who came out of India. And then it spread from there. In Tibet, the Buddhism arrived in Tibet about the 7th century. Bon had been there for many, many years prior to that. It was the difference between Bon and Tibetan Buddhism is very slight now. The two have amalgamated and merged, If you were not trained, you probably wouldn't know or be able to recognize the differences in the two in terms of the drawings and the iconography and so forth. But what happened was that as you see Buddhism spread, it begins to take on the culture of whatever country it was in. So the Zen in Japan and the Theravada or the Buddhism in Thailand all look very different than, for example, the Buddhism in Tibet. And that's because it absorbed the culture of the Bund that was there in the beginning. So all of the color and everything that goes along with it came from Bund. And Bund was there as both a esoteric training of the mind, but also a way, it was very earth-based in its practices in order to deal with this harsh climate that they had to deal with and to live with there. It is, in Buddha, there's not really a God. They talk about gods, but it's not like God. The gods are considered the enlightened beings, beings who have already become enlightened and are here to help us achieve our own path to enlightenment. Every one of us is a Buddha. There are as many Buddhas as there are stars in the sky. It's just that we haven't realized it yet and haven't been able to calm our minds enough to recognize our true natural state. Essentially, the religion is one that is based on the two wings of a bird, for example, compassion and wisdom. Wisdom being not necessarily smart, but the realization of the natural state of the mind. And so, as the Dalai Lama says, essentially it boils down to, my religion is kindness. So we want to do, add just a little bit to this. Harvey is going to talk about our trip to Tibet and the oppression of the Chinese on the Tibetans.
Unfortunately, the everyday life of Tibetans has worsened since we visited in 2014, according to Human Rights Watch, the U.S. State Department, and the U.S. Congressional Commission on China. From freedom of expression to religious freedoms, the Chinese government has kept a chokehold over the country throughout 2024, said Maya Wang, Associate China Director at Human Rights Watch. The Chinese government has further tightened abusive laws and imprisoned critics and rights defenders while making it increasingly difficult to report on government abuses throughout the country. For example, the Chinese government is building several dams while ignoring the plight of Tibetans who will be forced to move from scores of villages and monasteries that will be flooded. In February and March last year, hundreds of monks and villagers in Derge County, Sichuan, were detained for protesting construction of a hydroelectric dam. Among the threatened monasteries is Wantou Monastery, known for its well-preserved 13th century murals. The U.S. State Department reports that Tibetans are disappeared by the government. For example, Tibetan monk and writer Rongwo Gankar disappeared in 2021 after his arrest for speaking about the Dalai Lama at an informal gathering. Likewise, Karma Samduk disappeared in 2022 after his arrest for inciting separatism while possessing photos of the Dalai Lama. Both are still missing. The Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy maintained a database of more than 2,000 Tibetans imprisoned in violation of international human rights standards. Many are subjected to torture and other forms of abuse. Even Tibetans living outside the country are subjected to harassment, monitoring, and cyber attacks by the Chinese government. In one incident, a Tibetan living in Scotland received a video call from his family in Tibet. To his horror, he realized his family was in a police station. An officer appeared on the screen and warned him that his family would suffer if he publicly criticized Chinese policies. We witnessed Chinese oppression firsthand during our visit to Tibet in 2014. We flew over the Himalayas, getting a nice view of the top of Mount Everest, and landed at the Lhasa airport, about a 30-minute drive from the city. We were required to have a government-approved guide to monitor us, but the guide was late to arrive at the airport. Chinese officials would not let us through customs and officially into Tibet without our guide. That was our first brush with Chinese restrictions. One of the first things we noticed was the heavy Chinese military presence in Lhasa. Military bases were scattered throughout the city, each guarded by a soldier at port arms sheltered in a glass guardhouse. In downtown Lhasa, the police had a kiosk about every 100 yards. We had to go through a metal detector to enter the Barkor, the downtown square surrounding Tibet's oldest Buddhist temple, the Jokong. Matches and lighters were confiscated because of Buddhists setting themselves alight in front of the Jokong to protest the Chinese occupation. On Tibetan highways, we encountered police roadblocks every 50 miles or so, manned by police with automatic weapons. We had to show our passport at each roadblock, where our driver received a time-stamped certificate. The driver had to present the certificate at the next roadblock so officials would know how long it took us to get there. If the driver arrived too early, he got a ticket for speeding. That's why there were long lines of trucks waiting near the roadblocks, their drivers sitting in cafes, drinking tea, while waiting for the clock to run on their time-stamped certificates. The Chinese kept a tight rein on monasteries. We visited a small Buddhist monastery outside Lhasa. On the wall surrounding the garden was an organizational table with photos of monastery officials. At the top of the hierarchy was not a monk, not an abbot, but a member of the Chinese Communist Party. When we visited the Minri Monastery in Tibet, the premier monastery before it was supplanted by a new Minri monastery in India, outside Communist Party control, we were told by one of our guides to avoid interviewing monks. First, because we would not have been allowed to enter the country had Chinese officials known we were researching a book. Second, because every monk we spoke with would be interrogated by Chinese officials to find out what we had said. And third, because every monastery had spies that would report everything we did to the authorities. The monastery could be reached only by foot or on horseback until the Chinese built a road in the 1990s so they could dispatch police there quickly. When we were there, a police station was being built just below the remote monastery.
In addition to that story about the timesheets, if they arrived too slow, they wanted to know where you've been. So it's not just a speeding thing. We had so much fun doing this book in terms of research because every time we turned around or talked about someone else, there was another fascinating tidbit that someone brought up. We got a wonderful description of the pilgrimage around Mount Kailash, which is considered by many to be the center of the universe. There was a story about, a true story, all these are true stories, monks, murderous monks who took over a monastery, killed the highest people there at the monastery, and used it as their own stomping grounds for the trading that they wanted to do, while our main character Tenzin Namdok was there helping to paint sacred images with his family. The abject poverty of the lower classes of Lhasa, which was absolutely unheard of in the further more rural areas of Tibet. The United States CIA's connections to the Tibetans in trying to harass the Chinese. They brought a number of the Tibetans to Colorado to train them in sort of guerrilla warfare and radio techniques, dropped back in with arms. It was a complete disaster for the Tibetans, but that's another story. The research on the uprising in Lhasa that resulted in the fleeing of the Dalai Lama and our people. The escape of the monks from Minri. The Bonpos had a number of monasteries within Tibet, but the main monastery, the base of all, was called Minri Monastery. We have a picture of it here. This has been rebuilt since the Cultural Revolution. It was destroyed in the Cultural Revolution. But this is what it looked like because they had drawings of it at the Minri Monastery. So now what they've done is develop a Minri Monastery in exile, and it's in India, up in the northern part of India near the edge of the Himalayas, so that it feels more like home. It doesn't look like this. The red at the top are the temples, and the little white buildings down underneath here are dormitories or houses where people would come, the monks would stay or families would come for ceremonies. These monks escaped from here, went up over the back of that mountain there, and traveled about 10 days to get to another monastery where our main character Tenzin Namdok was staying, up on the Chongtong, if you want to go to the next one. This was his monastery, tiny. These pictures, I love these pictures because they show you how absolutely vast and remote Tibet is. So that little teeny tiny monastery, and you can see the Himalayas in the background. So they regrouped there with Tenzin Namdok and then set out from there, and 3 days from there is where they were ambushed by the Chinese, and most of the group was killed. Tenzin Namdok was shot and left for dead. The next one. This is where they were camping, Moro Reed. This is where they were camping when he was ambushed and shot. So then we have this remarkable story of how he survived. It was like magic or miracles, or the protectors came along, but just at the right time when he needed someone, they would show up to help him. He was in a concentration camp for about 10 months and then was able to escape and walk out over the Himalayas to Nepal. Then David Snellgrove, this British scholar who had a Rockefeller grant to bring Tibetans back to England to study, I guess to study them, but also to learn more about the culture, rounded up Bonpos instead of Buddhists and took them to London. Here's the next picture. Oh, this is Tenzin Namdok, one of our main characters, taken from the 60s. This is Sanjay Tenzin on the right and Samten Karme on the left. Those are the two that were best friends. This was taken at the monastery in Lhasa where they were studying sort of graduate school, what would be considered graduate school in Lhasa before they had to escape. Next. And this is all of them in London. You can see David Snellgrove up on the right-hand side in the corner, and then the three monks in their maroon robes here in the middle, Sanjay Tenzin, Samten Karme, and Tenzin Namdok. And if you are having trouble following the words, don't worry, that's normal unless you're Tibetan. I used to have a whiteboard where I had everybody's names written on it. I could just throw around my chair and look at my whiteboard to see if I had their names right. It was a real trouble for us to figure out how we were going to write the book, because not only are their names difficult to pronounce to begin with, but they change their names throughout their lives. So we finally decided to pick one name for each of them and keep it, which was controversial within the Bumpo community because they were not called by their titles or their fancy names that they achieved later in life. But we meant no disrespect. We were just trying to make it easy for people to follow along on the story. So this is when they went to London and changed their lives. They learned English, they learned the Western ways, they learned more about the world, and they met connections within the Catholic tradition that David Snellgroves was Catholic, within the Catholic tradition that later helped them to set up the settlement in India that allowed them to reestablish the community and the monastery. So they got so independent. Go ahead. They snuck off to see the Pope in Rome. You can see this is Sanjay Tenzin, and in the middle there, Samten Karme. Sanjay Tenzin went on to become the head of the monastery, actually the head of the religion. And Samten Karme left being a monk and became an academician and stayed in the West, learned Western ways of academia, and continued to write about the Bun tradition and Tibet for his entire career. He's a well-known, worldwide known academician in Tibetan ways. And then this is them now, or actually a few years ago. On the right is Tenzin Namdak, and on the left is His Holiness Minri Treason Tempo Longtak. So anyway, Sanjay Tenzin, our friend Sanjay Tenzin from the book. Sanjay Tenzin died in 2017. We were able to travel to India for his funeral, and Yongzin, or Tenzin Namdak here, sorry, he died on Thursday. I had 100 years and 3 months. Yeah, so it's he built a monastery in Kathmandu. So he is in Kathmandu, and Sanjay Tenzin was in India. So now, if we have time, if you all want, Harvey would like to read you the prologue to the book. Yes?
We're not very organized, so I haven't read.
Here, one. Hey, Harvey. And while I use this.
I told you we were very organized. Prologue. A deadly encounter at 15,000 feet. Fear hastened Tenzin Namdak to the top of a rocky ridge, one of the many that crisscross Tibet's highest plateau. A frigid wind whipped his face as he scanned the treeless, rocky landscape, searching for a glimpse of the Chinese troops who hunted him and his companions. He knew the soldiers would shoot them on sight. The year was 1960. The Chinese had invaded Tibet a decade earlier and cajoled it into surrender with promises of respect for its religion and culture. Forsaken by the rest of the world, its military severely outmatched, Tibet had grudgingly agreed to allow China to station troops in its capital, Lhasa. But Chinese communism was incompatible with the deeply religious Tibetan culture. Popular resentment swelled, finally exploding in a violent uprising. In retaliation, the Chinese began a vicious campaign of religious persecution. Tenzin, 34, one of the most revered lamas of the Bun religion, Tibet's oldest and least known faith, was among thousands of Tibetans fleeing the country to avoid Chinese re-education sessions, where they were forced to accuse, beat, and even execute neighbors and family members in a campaign targeting religion and class. Chinese troops were dispatched to seal the borders and hunt Tibetans fleeing to Nepal, India, and Bhutan. Tenzin hoped to outpace his pursuers as he headed west across Tibet's bleakest and least populated terrain. Strung out along the trail with Tenzin were 30 companions, among them the most learned Bun lamas. Others were monks who had renounced their vows of nonviolence in order to protect the lamas. The lamas and their escorts had traveled hundreds of miles from several different monasteries to Tenzin's small, remote monastery on the Chongtong Plateau, a vast and desolate landscape of high plains and mountains thinly populated by nomadic herders. In this time of crisis, they looked to Tenzin for direction because of his eminent reputation. They would have lost that leadership had he taken an offer of safe passage from a wealthy merchant making his way to the border, who told stories of Chinese cruelty and brought news that the Dalai Lama had fled the country. The merchant had urged Tenzin to leave with him, but Tenzin would not forsake his fellow monks. Disregarding his own safety, he had resolved to await word from the lamas who, unbeknownst to him, were dodging Chinese patrols as they made their way to him. Tenzin and the lamas had set out 3 days earlier, joined by dozens of lay Tibetans and a group of armed rebels. Tenzin divided them into 3 groups. Each group would travel within sight of the others, allowing the others to flee if one group was attacked. Heading west, they changed direction whenever they spotted the black yak-hair tents of nomads or their flocks of sheep. They knew that fear or Chinese silver could induce the nomads to betray their fellow Tibetans. The monks carried the few sacred texts and artifacts they had been able to rescue from their monasteries before they were looted by Chinese troops. Tenzin carried the most sacred object, a 600-year-old reliquary containing the ashes of the founder of Bun's premier monastery. The artifacts were mere slivers of a culture under assault by the Chinese. Soldiers were torturing and killing monks, razing temples, and destroying texts, statues, and paintings. Tenzin's world was being ripped apart. Escape was the only way to ensure the monks' survival and their survival of Bun itself. Their only escape route was across the daunting Himalayas that lay south of the vast plateau. In Sanskrit, Himalaya means the abode of snow. The Himalayas would be the final abode for untold numbers of Tibetans as they died from hunger, cold, avalanches, and steep plunges from rocky heights during their long trek to freedom. Moving as fast as possible, members of Tenzin's party continually cast wary eyes behind them. As the cold blue sky faded toward darkness, the monks made camp in the shadow of a mountain at the edge of a lake, tethering their pack animals and pitching their tents. While the animals were being unloaded, a black donkey reared and snorted, refusing to be handled. Tenzin saw it as a dark portent. As the monks crouched around the campfire, heating water for black tea, the crack of a single bullet rent the air. The men bolted upright in alarm. The shot grew to a fusillade as the Tibetans scattered. Streams of green tracer bullets licked at scurrying figures, pitching them onto the earth. Tenzin ran for his life.
We traveled to India and Nepal in December and January to pay our respects to those who are still alive that had been in our book. We started in Dharamsala, India, where we were fortunate to have a blessing from His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and then on to Minri Monastery in India, and then on to the monastery in Kathmandu. There is an old Zen phrase that before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, and after enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. All of the highest lamas and nuns that we visited with, including Tenzin Namdok, embodied this spirit. They are going about their daily lives, teaching, managing, trying to solve daily problems, but still with peace, calmness, and a joy that radiates. At least that's what we were experiencing. They are humans still, and it has been our experience throughout this endeavor. People were always very generous with their time and their stories to telling us about their experiences. The teachings of this religion say that this comes from the training of the mind, the calming of the mind, and the realization of the basic tenets, impermanence, inseparability, the nature of the mind. It is a tradition in many cultures for masters to leave final departing words of wisdom. In Japan, the haiku masters would write their death haikus. In the Bon tradition, these are known as pith instructions. And there's books full of pith instructions from masters thousands of years. And then there's also commentaries written about some of the more esoteric pith instructions. But less esoteric, but nonetheless impactful is the pith instructions from Tenzin Namdok. Maybe I should have Harvey read them. It's hard for at this time. It's really special for me to be able to read this. Your own mind, it's this one on the right. Your own mind is the root of both happiness and suffering. Knowing how to train it in the positive way, that is the basis for happiness. Merely following the passions of your mind, that is the basis for an ocean of misery and sufferings. Thus, if you know how to choose the right way, you are an excellent person. Thank you so much for having us. We have books back here. They for sale if you want to buy one. They're also available on audio if you like to listen to your books, and also on digital. And we also have bookmarks. They're free. Please help yourself. And again, thank you so much for having us and allowing us to share our wonderful adventure. Thank you.
Now let us join the Salish trio as we sing "This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine." In benediction, as we end this service, I want to suggest that as you go about your day-to-day lives this week, stay curious, serve your community, and be kind to family, friends, and above all, be kind to yourself. Now let's say our closing words together as I extinguish this chalice. You'll find them in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the loving joy of being freely together. We carry that joy until we meet again. We're going to have about 15 minutes of conversation and cookies and music first as a postlude. And then we will gather in the music room for further discussion if you wish. Thank you.
May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way home, guide your way